hook 015s. She paid $25,000, and somehow she owes more than when she started. Not a little more. More. $25,000 handed over, and the number on her statement went up. That is not a glitch. That is not bad luck. That is the system working exactly as it was designed to. Tension, 15 to 60s. Think about what that actually means for a second. You graduate. You do the responsible thing. You make your payments every single month, sometimes skipping groceries to do it, sometimes taking a second job, sometimes telling yourself that this is just temporary, that the debt will shrink, that you are making progress. And then you log in one day and the balance is higher than when you started. Not because you missed payments, not because you were irresponsible, but because of something called interest capitalization and income-driven repayment structures and deferment policies that nobody explained to you when you were 17 years old being handed a pen and told to sign. This is the story of the American student loan system. And it is not a story about personal responsibility. It is a story about a machine that was built to keep you paying forever. Body. Here is the first thing you need to understand about student debt. The moment you take out a federal student loan, interest begins accruing. Not when you graduate, not when you get a job, the moment the money is disbursed. For most undergraduate loans, that rate sits somewhere between 4 and 8% annually. For graduate and professional loans, it can climb above 9%. Now here is where it gets darker. When you enter an income-driven repayment plan, which the government marketed heavily as the compassionate, manageable option for people who couldn't afford standard payments, your monthly payment is calculated as a percentage of your discretionary income. Sometimes that number is low. Sometimes it is very low. And here is the thing nobody told you at the financial aid office. If your payment is lower than the interest accruing that month, the difference doesn't disappear. It gets added to your principal. That is called negative amortization. Your balance grows even when you pay, and then interest accrues on that larger balance, and then it grows again. This is not an edge case. This is the lived reality of millions of people. The borrower whose story went viral this week, she borrowed $49,548. She paid back $25,000. Her balance is now $50,121. She paid back more than half of what she borrowed, and she owes more than the day she graduated. Now you might be wondering, why would the government design it this way? And that question is where this story gets really uncomfortable. Because the federal student loan program is, functionally, a profit center. A 2012 analysis from the Congressional Budget Office found that the government expected to profit over $50 billion from student loans in a single fiscal year. The Department of Education has historically made money on defaulted loans through collection fees and wage garnishment. The entire architecture of income-driven repayment, which promised forgiveness after 20 or 25 years of payments, was built on a calculation that most people would pay far more than their original loan before that forgiveness ever arrived. And the forgiveness part? The SAVE plan, which was supposed to fix this, was blocked by courts in 2025. The Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program has had an approval rate that hovered near 1% for most of its history. So, let's hold two ideas at the same time. The government told an entire generation that education was the path to a better life, and then it structured the financing of that education as a multi-decade extraction mechanism. But here is what I want you to sit with, because this is where the psychology gets really interesting. Why did people keep paying? Not the ones in default. The ones who were scraping and sacrificing and doing the responsible thing. Why didn't more people stop? There is a concept in behavioral economics called the sunk cost fallacy. The more you have already invested in something, the harder it becomes to walk away, even when walking away is the rational choice. You have already paid $25,000, So you keep paying, because stopping feels like admitting that the $25,000 was wasted. Even though stopping or switching strategies might be the only thing that actually saves you. But there is something even deeper going on here. Something more insidious. Researchers who study financial shame have found that people in debt, especially education debt, internalize their situation as a personal moral failure rather than a systemic outcome. You feel like you should have known better. You feel like you should have chosen a different major, a cheaper school, a different life. The shame becomes so consuming that it prevents you from engaging with the actual mechanics of your debt at all. And that shame, that paralysis, that is incredibly useful to the people collecting the payments. A person who is too ashamed to look at their statement is a person who does not notice their balance growing. A person who believes their debt is their fault is a person who does not organize with other people who have the same debt. A person who is focused on their personal responsibility is not focused on the system that created the trap. The shame is not a side effect. The shame is a feature. Now let's talk about the generation this happened to, because the timing matters. Millennials entered college between roughly 1998 and 2012. They were told, explicitly and repeatedly, that a college degree was a guaranteed ticket to middle-class stability. The data supported this at the time. In 1980, a college degree correlated strongly with lifetime earnings that justified the cost of tuition. But between 1980 and 2010, tuition at public universities increased by over 200% in inflation-adjusted terms. The credential became more expensive at the exact same time that wages for degree holders stagnated. The promise stayed the same. The economics inverted. And then a generation of people who did everything right, who followed every instruction, who signed every form and attended every orientation and believed every projection about future earnings, graduated into a labor market that had quietly changed the rules while they were in class. That is not a personal failure. That is a betrayal. And the rage you see online right now, the posts that get tens of thousands of upvotes, the ones where someone shares their loan balance and the comment section fills with thousands of identical stories, that rage is not irrational. It is the sound of a generation finally naming what happened to them. Climax. Here is the central truth of this entire system, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Student loans were never designed to be repaid quickly. They were designed to be serviced, indefinitely. A loan that gets paid off in 5 years generates a finite amount of interest. A loan that gets stretched over 25 years, that grows through capitalization, that resets through deferment, that spawns fees through income-driven plans, that loan is worth exponentially more to the system that holds it. The incentive was never to help you become debt-free. The incentive was to keep you in a managed state of obligation, financially tethered, stable enough to keep paying, stretched thin enough to never fully escape. And the most sophisticated part of the entire design, they made you feel like you deserved it. Ending. There is a scene in the movie The Incredibles, a Pixar movie from 2004, that keeps resurfacing online. The villain, Syndrome, explains his plan to give everyone superpowers so that when everyone is super, no one will be. People keep sharing it because it captures something true about credential inflation, about how the system keeps moving the bar just out of reach. But the student loan machine is a different kind of movie. This one does not have a satisfying third act yet. Millions of people are still inside the system, still paying, still watching balances grow, still waiting for forgiveness that keeps getting blocked or delayed or redefined. What you can do right now is understand what you are actually dealing with. Not a personal failing, not a consequence of bad choices, a structure. Built by people who understood math better than a 17-year-old signing forms at a financial aid office. Knowing that will not zero out your balance, but it might be the beginning of demanding something that does. Share this with someone who thinks their student debt is their fault. Because the most powerful thing the system ever did was convince you that it was.